Prabhupada ki jai, Prabhupada ki jai. All right. Here we are. We are just about ready. Just 1 second. Sound. Mute everybody. All right. Let me just check to see we got the right microphones here. Yep, right microphone set up. And here we are. Here we are in the forest of material enjoyment. Okay. So we'll chant Jai Radhamadhava first. Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunya Bihari Gopi Janabalaba Girivardhari Gopi Janabalaba Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Rajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunya Bihari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunya Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Girivardhari Gopi Janaballabha Girivardhari Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhuva Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Padamahansa Parabhikacharya also Teta Satashi Shimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Chanananda Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shidwaita Gadadha Sivasari Gaur Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shyam Kund Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavanam Ki Jai Maturam Ki Jai Jagat Goswami Ki Jai Vanamai Ki Jai Shrimati Lasi Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Om. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees. All glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale. Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pachani Nirvashesha Shunyavani Paschacha Dejatarni Om Ganat Midanda Shah Gananjana Shlakaya Chaksuran Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances under the lotus feet of my spiritual master's divine grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who so kindly opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge while I was blinded in the darkness of ignorance. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, we're going to continue with our study of the Nectar of Devotion, but first we always chant this one prayer, which is one of the verses from the Goswami Ashtaka, written by Srinivas Acharya. So, Nana Shastra Vicharanaika Nipano Sadharma Samstapako Lokandam Itakarano Tribhuvane Manyo Sharanyakaro Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Mandena Matali Ko Mande Rupa Sanatano Raguyako Shri Jiva Gopala Ko. Okay, and the translation is, I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatana Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus they are honored all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of, because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in the transcendental loving service of Radha and Krishna. Okay, now we'll continue with our Nectar of Devotion study. We are on chapter 8. Hold on a second. We will share the screen. And of course, this chapter is further consideration of regulated principles. Technically, it's called, technically the name of the chapter 8 is called, 7 actually, Evidence Regarding Devotional Principles. Chapter 7, not 8. 8 is about offenses. Okay, let's go. Here we go. So, similarly, a bona fide spiritual master has no business reading many books simply to show his proficiency or to get popularity by lecturing in different places. One should avoid all these things. It is also stated that a sannyasi should not be enthusiastic about constructing temples. We can see in the lives of various acharyas in the line of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that they were not very enthusiastic about constructing temples. However, somebody comes forward to offer some service, the same reluctant acharyas will encourage the building of costly temples by such servitors. For example, Rupa Goswami was offered a favor by Maharaj Man Singh, the commander-in-chief of Emperor Akbar, and Rupa Goswami instructed him to construct a large temple for Govindaji, which cost vast amounts of money. So, on the other hand, Srila Prabhupada was enthusiastic about constructing temples for preaching, not for any other purpose, for bringing people to Krishna consciousness, because he understood that people would come when they saw these beautiful temples with the deity in them, not just a big building. Now, there's some more interesting stories about the Goswamis and their reluctance to build temples, or even their reluctance to handle money. And somehow or other, Krishna arranged, actually it's not somehow or other, but Krishna did arrange. Krishna arranged for them to have money and to construct temples. Two stories I'll tell in this regard. One is the story of Sanatana Goswami and the deity named Madan Mohan. So before the deity Madan Mohan was called Madan Mohan, he was called Madan Gopal, and he was in the care of a Brahmin family in Mathura. Actually, it was the Dvaitacharya who put the deity in the care of this Brahmin family. So this Brahmin family They were worshiping in, let's say, a Raganuga pure devotional mood. Uh, they did not actually put the deity on the altar. They actually treated the deity as one of their sons. And so the deity would sit at the dinner table with everybody else and eat with everybody else. And the other sons would play marbles with the deities. I don't know how they did it, but somehow they did it. Not that they used the deity for marbles, but the deity was actually playing the game with the kids. So in this way, life was going on, and Krishna was happy with that. Because Krishna likes it more when his devotees deal with him in an intimate way. At least the pure devotees. For the rest of us, who have still not realized that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, we may not have complete faith, we should deal with him in the mood of awe and reverence, like Srila Prabhupada instructed us, that when we worship the deities in the temple, specifically Radha and Krishna deities, we should be worshiping them in the mood of Lakshmi and Narayan. That means God and Lakshmi. Okay? Rather than, hey, Radha and Krishna, where's your dance? Dance, dance. No, anyway, that's not appropriate. So, in any case, this Brahmin couple and their children were treating the deity, that is Madan Gopal, like their son. And then Sanatana Goswami saw that. And he said, this is not proper. You should have the deity on the altar, and, this is proper deity worship. And so, what happened is that they did that. Of course, they followed the directions of Sanatana Goswami. Sanatana Goswami went back to this place where he was meditating called Dwadasadicha Hill. And this hill was called Dwadasadicha Hill because this was the hill that Lord Krishna climbed up upon after kicking the heads of the Kali serpent. And why did he climb up on this hill? Because Lord Krishna was freezing. Sometimes the moon is very cold. Of course, the Lord does not have a material body. So there's no question of the Lord freezing like us or feeling too hot like we do. But in any case, this was his pastime. So he climbed up on top of this hill, and the sun shone with 12 times its normal heat and brilliance to dry him up. So that was called Dwadasadicha Hill. So Sanatana Goswami was sitting on this hill, and he had a dream one day after he instructed this couple to take care of their deity properly. And in this dream, the deity came to him and said, hey, Swamiji, you ruined all my fun. I was enjoying life. And you have to accept me now. And Sanatana Goswami said, no, I can't do that. I have no house, no bhajan kutir, basically, no facilities. And I'm just eating, whatever's there. I'm not cooking anything, and deity worship requires so much endeavor, so many artis a day, so much cooking and keying, so not going to work. But that Brahmin who was taking care of Madan Gopal had the same sort of instruction from the deity, and then he brought the deity the next day to Sanatana Goswami and said, here is Madan Gopal. And Sanatana Goswami said, how am I going to take care of him? What am I going to do? And the deity said to him basically, I'll just eat whatever you eat, just don't worry about it. Sanatana Goswami had so many things to do for Lord Chaitanya. So basically, he had the deity in the tree. Sometimes it's described as the deity was hanging from the tree. Not hanging by the neck, hanging in a nice swing or something like that from the tree. And so he was offering to the deity whatever he was eating. And usually it was some atta, like whole wheat that was made into a ball or flattened out and baked in the sun because it's very hot there in Vrindavan in the summer. So after a while, the deity said to him, at that point is Madan Mohan, said to him, can I have some salt too? This is a little too much, dried bread balls or dried bread cakes and no salt. And so Sanatana Goswami said, look, I told you you're going to have to eat everything I ate. And I can't make extra endeavor because basically I have all this work to do. I have to establish the holy places in Vrindavan for Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, write Vaishnava literatures like the Brihad Bhagavatamrita. I'm a busy man. I don't have time for deity worship. You know, if you want salt, you have to figure out how to get it yourself. So shortly after that, so that shows that a great devotee like Sanatana Goswami is not enthusiastic to build a temple. So shortly after that, when the water in the Yamuna, which was right below this hill of Dwadasadija, was very, very low, and there was a boat, I guess a barge, on its way to Mathura to sell salt. And this boat got stuck on what's called a sandbar. Anyone who's been boating knows what a sandbar is. I remember we had a boat when I was young. We'd always get stuck on a sandbar, and we have to wait until the tide raised, high tide, and that way we could take our boat out. So anyway, so this boat was stuck on the sandbar, and the owner and master of the boat came and saw Sanatana Goswami on the hill and said, Sanatana Goswami, you have to help me. And Sanatana Goswami said, I can't do anything about it. I'm just a sannyasi. He said, if you wanted someone to help you, go see Madan Mohan there. He's, in the tree. Just pray to him. So this man prayed to Madan Mohan. And then all of a sudden, boom, there was a rainstorm. Torrential rain came down. And when that torrential rain came down, the Yamuna started to rise. And the boat was freed and could go on its journey all the way to Mathura to sell the salt. So what happened was the money from that salt sale was used to construct the Madan Mohan temple. So Sanatana Goswami never went out and begged for money, just Krishna provided it. Okay, one other story I told you I'd tell about this. So Lord Chaitanya's most renounced follower was Raghunath Das Goswami. And Raghunath Das Goswami was so renounced because previously he had come from a very, very wealthy family. He didn't want to touch money or have anything to do with money. So obviously there was no plan to arrange anything with money. But he was there at Radhakund and Shamakund. Now, if you remember from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes, Radhakund and Shamakund were just like puddles in a paddy field. Paddy field is like a rice field or something like that. And so he was there chanting, very happy, Radhakund, Shamakund, Giri Govardhan, who could be happier than that? And he was thinking, I'd really like to make Radhakund a holy place that people can come to. It's already a holy place, but a holy place that people can come to. You have a nice embankments around the pond, maybe expand the pond a little bit. So what am I going to do? He was thinking. And he said, I have no money, and I'm not going to ask people for money. He was thinking like a very renounced personality. Generally, sannyasi shouldn't be asking people for money. And Prabhupada, let me just try to think of Prabhupada, yes, he instructed his disciples to ask people for money. Just like when he wanted to publish the Krishna book, he sent Shamashundara to George Harrison. And they had never really asked anything from George Harrison before, just little things. Like marble for the temple that they were making. Anyway, so he sent Shamashundara to George Harrison, and Shamashundara was really reluctant because he didn't want to destroy the relationship. So eventually he sort of hinted to George Harrison and said to George Harrison, Prabhupada would like, was it $10,000 or $20,000 to print the Krishna book? And George was sort of shocked that he was being asked that question. And then all of a sudden, all the lights went out, and there was a tremendous thunder, lightning, boom. And the lights went on, and George smiled. He said, I guess Krishna wants it. Anyway. So Oh, getting back to the story of Raghunath Das Goswami. Raghunath Das Goswami had no idea of collecting money. He wanted to do it, no idea of collecting money. So he was sitting there at Radhakund just chanting happily, thinking it would be nice if we could expand Radhakund and make it like a delineated place. So at the same time, there was a very wealthy merchant. And this wealthy merchant was visiting in the Himalayas, Badarik Ashrama. That's where Narayan Rishis are. Anyway, and he was getting ready to make a big offering of money to Lord Badrinath in Badarik Ashram. So he was thinking, let me offer this money. And then he had the instructions in a dream, perhaps, from Lord Badrinath. He said, look, don't give me the money. You go to Radhakund and you find Raghunath Das Goswami. And you give him all this money to excavate Radhakund. So he comes down from the Himalayas, goes to Radhakund, finds Raghunath Das Goswami, and offers him the money. And the interesting thing about Raghunath Das Goswami, his renunciation, he didn't really want to have money or manage it or anything like that. And in most cases, he had Srila Jiva Goswami do all the legal work and the management and everything like that, because he was very reluctant, given the instructions by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in regard to his past involvement in an opulent life, because his family was extremely rich, and Lord Chaitanya wanted him to exhibit the epitome of renunciation from this material world. So anyway, so money came and it was done. So that's the point. If money comes, then one can do it. Money doesn't come, we just chant. We preach Krishna consciousness, because constructing a big temple means headaches. So a bona fide spiritual master should not personally take any responsibility for constructing temples. But if someone has money and wants to spend it in the service of Krishna, an acharya like Rupa Goswami may utilize the devotee's money to construct nice, costly temple for the service of the Lord. So it's interesting. It's almost like a contradiction. Does not personally take any responsibility, but if someone comes forward, he takes responsibility. So, what is Krishna's desire? Renunciation means that you do what Krishna wants, and that's what Krishna gives as his final message at the end of the Gita. Sarvadharman parichaja mamekam sharanam praja ham tvam sarvabhapebhyo mokshayashyami masachaha. Just give up your conceptions of what you think you should do, and if Krishna tells you to do something different, do it. That's the point, and that was Arjuna's lesson. Unfortunately, it happens that someone who is not fit to become a spiritual master may approach a wealthy person to contribute for temple constructions. If such money is utilized by unqualified spiritual masters for living comfortably in costly temples without actually doing any preaching work, this is not acceptable. In other words, a spiritual master needn't be very enthusiastic for constructing temple buildings simply in the name of so-called spiritual advancement. Rather, his first and foremost activity should be to preach. In this connection, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami recommended that a spiritual master print books if one has money instead of constructing costly temples. One should spend his money for the publication of authorized books in different languages for propagating the Krishna consciousness movement. So that's interesting. So let's give a little history. Prabhupada here is sort of indirectly relating an instruction he got from his spiritual master, and that instruction he got at Radha Kund. And where he got that instruction at Radha Kund is very interesting. There's the ashram of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Radha Kund, very beautiful ashram. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur lived there for some time, and especially when he was leading his disciples on the pilgrimage around Braj. So one time, Prabhupada actually had a private conversation with him, and Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was sitting on a swing, not an outdoor swing. It's one of the swings that people have in their houses. In fact, I have one in my house too. But in this particular case, the swing was attached to the girders on the ceiling, and they were the ropes or the chains, and it was like a bed connected to it that would swing back and forth, and it was a swing. So he was seated on the swing, and His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada was seated on the floor or on a chair in front of him. The swing was quite high. And so Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had just been frustrated with his disciples, or had been upset with his disciples, because his disciples, upon finishing a temple in Calcutta, the Bhagavad Bazar temple, were actually fighting with each other over who would have which room. Like that. And he got so disgusted with his disciples for that what he did was that he made this statement to Srila Prabhupada: if you ever get any money, print and distribute books. But also he said, if I could, I would sell the marble from the temples to distribute or print books. So there's a very heavy statement. Prabhupada one time made that statement too, and I was there when I was at one temple. I don't really want to point out which temple it was. But this temple had actually disobeyed Prabhupada's instructions and spent money on changing the temple room from where Prabhupada wanted it. It spent quite a bit of money. And Prabhupada said on the Vyasasana, one of the first things Prabhupada said was that my spiritual master said if one could sell the marble from the temples to distribute books, then one should use it for distribution of books. And then, anyway, that was a pretty heavy statement that Srila Prabhupada made. However, then why should we construct costly temples? Well, one has to examine the utility of constructing costly temples. If, as Prabhupada said, utility is the principle, if it will actually increase book distribution and the propagation of Krishna consciousness, then it can be done carefully at that point. But if it's not going to increase that, if it's just going to increase the number of what we call kanishta adhikari devotees, or people just take things cheaply, or people just come to the temple for blessings or sightseeing, then it may not be the best use of money. On the other hand, if people give money for construction of the temple, it must be used for that particular purpose. You know, sometimes there's some controversy in this ISKCON that, people are spending so much money for constructing this temple or that temple. I'm not going to get into the specific temples. Why don't they spend it on taking care of devotees, which is actually more important? Devotee care is more important than building buildings. Yes, obviously. Well, the point is that the money is not discretionary when it's given for building a temple. It must only be spent on the building of the temple, design of the temple, clearing of the land, building the temple. That's not a discretionary amount of money. When people give money for a specific purpose, it must be spent for that particular purpose, even though you may have things of a higher priority in your mind. And there's nothing you can do about that. So anyway, so this is the background behind Prabhupada writing this. Interesting background, interesting stories. So next is straightforwardness in ordinary dealings and equilibrium in loss and gain. There's a statement in the Padma Purana: persons who are engaged in Krishna consciousness should never be disturbed by some material gain or loss. Even if there is some material loss, one should not be perturbed, but should always think of Krishna within himself. And there will be so many material losses. I mean, apart, of course, losing things spiritually, like if you lose your godbrother, that's a spiritual loss. And you can be perturbed and crying. I remember when Prabhupada left this world, it was very disturbing because we were losing his association. But we become attracted and repulsed by mundane things and mundane people too, so that is an issue. The purport, so anyway, and sometimes we'll be very rich and sometimes we'll be very poor. But the lamentation and hankering should not be for material things. It should be for things connected to Krishna or people connected to Krishna. The purport is that every conditioned soul is always absorbed in thinking of materialistic activities. He has to free himself from such thoughts and transfer himself completely to Krishna consciousness. As we have already explained, the basic principle of Krishna consciousness is to always think of Krishna. One should not be disturbed in material loss, but rather should concentrate his mind upon the lotus feet of the Lord. In fact, when there is some material loss, it should be a lesson for you. Learn from material losses. First of all, how you may not need that particular thing. Secondly, what the nature of this material world is. That ultimately we lose everything. We lose our youth. We lose our body. And in the case of certain politicians, they lose their mind. Sorry about that. A devotee should not be subjected to lamentation or illusion. There's the following statement in the Padma Purana. Within the heart of a person who is overpowered by lamentation or anger, there's no possibility of Krishna's being manifested. So these strong material illusions just keep Krishna from manifesting, whether it's envy or envious of someone else, or angry, or lamenting. Oh, I wish I had that. Oh, I lost that. Hankering and lamentation. Or illusion. I'm so great. I'm the best, And you discover you're not the best, then you start to lament. So, we have to keep ourselves from being overwhelmed by these things. I mean, these things may come, but, it's just life. Friends become enemies, enemies become friends. Our best friend leaves us and turns against us. Anyway, so many relationships break up and come together like pieces of seaweed in the ocean. And what can you do? People die. What can you do? You can't get angry at Krishna for it. Well, you can, but you shouldn't. The demigods. One should not neglect to offer due respect to the demigods. Oops. But that does not mean that he should be one may not be a devotee of the demigods, but that does not mean that he should be disrespectful to them. For example, a Vaishnava is not a devotee of Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, but he is duty-bound to offer all respects to such highly positioned demigods. According to Vaishnava philosophy, one should offer respect even to an ant. So then what is there to speak of such exalted persons as Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma? When it says that one should not be a devotee of Lord Shiva or Lord Brahma, that means in the sense of considering them to be equal to or independent of Krishna and the supreme object of worship. But you can be a devotee in the sense of considering them to be devotees. Like Lord Shiva says, better than worship of Krishna or Vishnu is worship of Krishna's devotees. So Lord Shiva is a devotee of Krishna. Lord Brahma is a devotee of Krishna. So we worship them in the right way. There's this interesting verse. What is it? Yastu Narayanam Devam Ramarudradi Daivata Samitpayanaiva Viksheta Sapashandi Bhavadrabam. One who considers Brahma or Rudra, same thing as here, Shiva or Lord Brahma, to be equal to Lord Vishnu, is a Pashandi, which means atheist. If you call someone a Pashandi in India, you're in trouble. So it's better have a bodyguard when you do that. So anyway, so we respect them as devotees, like we respect Prabhupada as a great devotee. But if you start to think Prabhupada is God, that is not the type of worship you're supposed to give Prabhupada. That is ridiculous. In the Padma Purana, it said, Krishna Hari is the master of all demigods, and therefore he's always worshipable. But this does not mean that one should not offer respect to the demigods. In fact, when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was touring South India, he would visit the temples of the demigods and even visited Lord Shiva, and he would offer obeisances. No problem. because these are great devotees of the Lord. If I see Prabhupada, I offer obeisances, not considering him to be God, but to be the topmost servant of God. So the next one is not giving pain to any living entity. This is the statement of the Mahabharata. A person who does not disturb or cause painful action in the mind of any living entity who treats everyone just like a loving father does his children, whose heart is so pure, certainly very soon becomes favored by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, this describes His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada, other than in his preaching, he did not disturb anyone's mind. He was actually dear to everyone. Dira adira jana priyo priya karo, as described in another prayer to the 6 Goswamis of Vrindavan. They were loved by both the devotees and non-devotees. Why? Niramatsuro, pujito. And they were worshipable because they were not envious. Envious means several different things. First of all, I want what you have. That's one thing it means. Another thing is I want to use you for my own sense gratification. Like if I kill an animal to eat it, or I buy the animal in the store, I'm envious of the animal. Because what do I want? I want its body. I want to use it for my sense gratification. That's envy. Just think about it for a second. If I'm really envious of, let's say, a cow's body, and I want to possess it. Because the person is not the body. The person possesses the body. So you're envious of what the person possesses. You're not actually envious of the soul. You're envious of what the person possesses. You want what the person possesses, which is his body, which belongs to Krishna and is being utilized for that person or by that person, hopefully to serve Krishna, not to serve Krishna. That's their problem, not yours. In so-called civilized society, there is sometimes agitation against cruelty to animals. But at the same time, regular slaughterhouses are always maintained. A Vaishnava is not like that. A Vaishnava can never support animal slaughter or even give pain to any living entity, including an ant. Now, it's interesting, in America, I always use this example, that if you hurt a dog or a cat, or what to speak if you ate them, you go to jail. That was against the law. But if you take a cow, which is much more dear to Krishna, and actually every animal is dear to Krishna, but in any case, the cows are very special to Krishna. So if you take a cow and you eat it, or cow and you cook it, not only will you not go to jail, but you can invite the police force over to enjoy, quote, enjoy eating the cow or the pig, or you can even do it at your church. You have a barbecue at your church. Really amazing. You would think that churches should be places for compassion and love. That's what Lord Jesus taught. The Bible, it says, the lion will lay down with the lamb. It doesn't say the lion will devour the lamb. It says the lion will lay down with the lamb. Of course, in this world, it's all right for the lion to eat the lamb because that's the nature. Jiva sa jivanam. One living entity lives by eating another living entity. But these slaughterhouses are the most abominable thing. Not only slaughterhouses, how they treat different animals. I was just reminded the other day of how people, let's say, would partake of a lobster when they go to a restaurant. How do they partake of a lobster? They go to the restaurant that specializes in lobsters. Actually, Prabhupada said eating a lobster or a crab or something like that is like eating pus, but that's another subject matter. Because they have exoskeletons. That means they're skeletons on the outside, and all the meat is on the inside. So what happens is you go to this restaurant. I know this firsthand. I have to admit it from before I joined the Krishna conscious movement. You go to the restaurant, and they have like a fish tank in the front of the restaurant, and that fish tank is not full of fish. It's full of live lobsters, which are living entities. They have eyes. Their eyes sort of come out from their body, and they have claws and everything like that. Okay, and so what you do, you have the ability to go to the waiter and say, take this one, and that's the one I want. And so they take that lobster, and they throw him into a pot of boiling water and boil him alive. So this poor entity is being boiled alive right before your eyes, or if you happen to go in the kitchen, or by your behest, just so you can enjoy him, okay? And then they bring him out on a plate, the full body of the lobster that you saw who was previously alive. There's no doubt, there's no illusion about it. And how do you eat him? It's amazing. You take a nutcracker. I don't know if any of you have seen a nutcracker. It's like two pieces of metal on a hinge, cracking nuts usually. And you crack open his skin and take the flesh from inside. I mean, this is horrible. So we're not only talking about slaughterhouses. I mean, how can anyone support this horrible activity? Torturing poor living entities. Just so you can crack open their bones and eat the marrow or the flesh inside the bone. Sorry about this. So this is reality. This is reality. So even when people see it right in front of them and they're doing it, they continue doing it because they have uncontrolled tongues. So anyway, so a devotee can never support this sort of thing or give pain to any living entity. The only time when there's some pain you give to another living entity is when you're protecting yourself. Obviously, we're not advocates of absolute nonviolence where you just allow yourself to get beaten up or someone else to get beaten up. You have to defend someone else. Very important. Innocent people should be defended. Actually, you have to protect women, old people, Brahmins, and cows and children. So we should become angry if one of those entities becomes threatened. So I guess we'll go on to the next chapter. Next chapter is chapter 8, offenses to be avoided. Okay. Right. In the supplementary Vedic literature, there is the following list of 32 offenses in the matter of serving the Lord. These are generally to do with the deity worship, although there's some in regard to chanting the Lord's holy names. But generally in this chapter, it relates to deity worship. One should not enter the temple of the deity in a car or palanquin or with shoes on the feet. And that's not only traditional, it's practical. In fact, in many temples, in India at least, you're supposed to wash your feet, even if you don't have shoes or you don't have socks on. You're supposed to wash your feet. In some temples we've been in, they actually have automatic washers of feet, not robots, but they have flowing water, like in Tirumala, flowing water that, let's say, flows over your the pathway that you're going to use and washes your feet. And so your feet are naturally clean. So this is very, very important, that you take off your shoes before you go into the temple, and you don't enter the temple of the deity on a palanquin. Of course, a pure devotee who is sick or their final days, like Prabhupada, they carry him into the temple on a palanquin. That's a different thing. So this is not an absolute principle, but it should be applied whenever possible. If you're very sick, you can't walk, obviously, you go in a wheelchair. There's no problem with that. But the idea is you show respect to the deities, enter without shoes on your feet. And I remember when I was young, my parents would not even let me go in the house with shoes on my feet. Everything had to be left outside or at the door. This is polite culture. In the Orient, it's always like that. You know, in America, sometimes people wear their mud boots in the house, and that's so much against the principle of cleanliness. 2, one should not fail to observe the various festivals for the pleasure of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, such as Janmashtami and Rath. I mean, they're such blissful festivals. Why would someone not want to follow or celebrate them? 3, one should not avoid bowing down before the deity. You know, bow down, Mr. Hari Krishna, Hari Ram. 4, one should not enter the temple to worship the Lord without having washed one's hands and feet after eating. Very important. After you eat and before you eat, you should wash your hands. Now, sometimes in the West, you know, we have socks and everything like that. The feet thing is actually optional. Has to be. I mean, you have to be practical. I remember in the early days in the movement, we had a sink in the prasadam room, and because people wanted to follow this particular injunction very strictly, after prasadam, they would stick their feet, and this it was a normal sink, just a little tiny sink, a hand washing sink. They would stand on one foot, put one foot up, and put it, and that was the same sink that we used to wash our plates in, and our hands. I mean, it was really not a nice thing. So one has to be practical. One should not enter the temple in a contaminated state. According to the Vedic scriptures, someone dies in the family, the whole family becomes contaminated for some time according to its status. For example, the family is a Brahmana, their contamination period is 12 days. For the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, 15 days. For the Shudras, 30 days. And if someone is a Vaishnava, Shuddha Vaishnava, it's only 2 or 3 days. 6, one should not bow down on one hand. Use both hands. 7, one should not circumambulate in front of Shri Krishna. You know, your circumambulation is behind him, like I do on the outside of the temple. If we construct a new temple, it looks like we will, a new temple for the deities here, we're going to have the parikrama path, that's the circumambulation path, inside the building around the deity room. That'll be very wonderful, and the devotees will be allowed to sponsor different tiles on the parikrama path, on the wall of the parikrama path, with the names of their relatives or themselves, whoever they want to be blessed by having the devotees seeing them. And that will actually help sponsor the construction of the temple. So that's the next step here in Nuvaloka. Very exciting. The process of circumambulating the temple is that one should begin circumambulating from the deity's right-hand side of the temple and come round. Such circumambulation should be performed outside the temple structure at least 3 times daily. Outside the temple structure means outside where the deities are. One talks about temple structure, where the deities are sitting. Because in India, is usually open courtyard temples, so you have to go outside around the deity area. And that was important. And that's done, well, in Tirupati, they just go around the deities, yeah. Tirupati, the new temple in Tirupati, they just go around the deities. Very, very important that one circumambulate the deities. Such circumambulation should be performed outside the temple structure at least 3 times daily. One should not spread his legs before the deity. Especially you don't spread your legs and have your feet sticking out in front of the deities. One should not sit before the deity holding the ankles, elbows, or knees with one's hands. Now, some of these don't have to worry about too much. I mean, if you think about all of them, but some of these rules are actually there because you're dealing with a specific culture. One should not lie down before the deity of Krishna. Now, of course, we offer obeisances before Krishna's deity, but generally we don't lie unless we're experiencing ecstasy. I remember this is a funny story, when I was a new devotee, I was worshiping the deity, and I was really tired at that time, so after I offered obeisances, I'd sometimes fall asleep. And I'd wake up in time to do the arti. One should not lie down before the deity. One should not accept prasad before the deity. And I remember one time Prabhupada had us accepting prasad before the deity. That was during his Vyasa Puja ceremony. There were 3 deities there. And devotee said, I thought we're not supposed to accept prasad before the deities. And Prabhupada said, that's all right, everybody eat. And because that was a special ceremony. 12. One should never speak a lie before the deity. So if you have to have some judgment or case or dispute between devotees, it can be ameliorated in front of the deity, because everybody would be afraid of lying before the deity. One should not talk very loudly before the deity. One should not talk with others before the deity. One should not cry or howl before the deity. I mean, sometimes the devotee's in genuine ecstasy. That's another thing. One should not quarrel or fight before the deity. Yeah, if you have to fight with a devotee, just say, step outside the temple room. Prabhu, I want to fight with you. That's obvious. Krishna is king. You don't want to fight in front of him. 17, one should not chastise anyone before the deity. 18, one should not be charitable to beggars before the deity. 19, hold on a second. One should not speak very harshly to others before the deity. 20, one should not wear a fur blanket before the deity. Fur referring to the fur of an animal, not wool. You know, fur like chinchilla. You know, don't have animal skin in front of the deity. One should not eulogize or praise anyone else before the deity unless one's praising the servitors of the deity or the spiritual master. I mean, there's exceptions to these things. One should not speak ill names before the deity. One should not pass air before the deity. One should not fail to worship the deity according to one's means. In Bhagavad Gita is stated that the Lord is satisfied if some devotee offers him even a leaf or a little water. This formula prescribed by the Lord is universally applicable, even for the poorest man. But that does not mean that one who has sufficient means to worship the Lord very nicely should also adopt this method and try to satisfy the Lord simply by offering water and a leaf. If he has sufficient means, he should offer nice decorations, nice flowers, and nice foodstuffs and observe all ceremonies. It is not that one should try to satisfy the Supreme Lord with a little water and a leaf, and for himself spend all his money in sense grab. 25. One should not eat anything which is not offered first to Krishna, only prasad. One should not fail to offer fresh fruit and grains to Krishna according to the season. 27. After food has been cooked, no one should be offered any foodstuff unless it is first offered to the deity. One should not sit with his back toward the deity. One should not offer obeisances silently to the spiritual master. In other words, one should recite aloud the prayers to the spiritual master while offering obeisances. In other words, no, Vishnu Padai. You could say it softly. Vishnu Padai, Krishna Prasad, Budale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani. One should not fail to offer some praise in the presence of the spiritual master. One should not praise himself before the spiritual master. I am such a good servitor of yours. You don't know how fortunate you are to have me as your disciple. One should not deride the demigods before the deity. Okay, and that's all we have time for today. And we'll continue tomorrow, and now we will take some questions. Hold on a second. All right, give me a second to unmute you. Who has questions? Anybody have questions? No one?
Hare Krishna Gurudev.
Oh, Hare Krishna Sita. Okay,
Yeah.
good to see you. What question do you have?
I have a simple question in regards to deity worship. Um, I've just started waking up the deities, and I've got instructions from the Brahman from the temple. It's about the Mula mantra. It's written there, the Mula mantra. I just wanted
Yeah.
to understand what that is and whether it's important. And
Well, it actually depends upon how elaborate your deity worship is. It's the mantra that actually calls attention to the deities, up to yourself, and offering respect to the deities. It's not really necessary to use that in home deity worship. I mean, in home deity worship, I'd be really simple and just, I mean, keep the mantras to a minimum. You understand? I don't think you need to use the mula mantras in home deity worship, nor do you need to use mudras. I don't know if they told you about mudras.
Yes, yes.
Even in the
They
temples,
mentioned it.
even the temples probably really didn't want mudras used, although some temples they use mudras.
Okay.
So I think just, very simple. There's when you wake the deities up, there's a simple mantra for waking up Radha and Krishna, Go, Gopa, Go, Kulananda, Yashodananda, Vardhana, Dishta Radhaya, Sadam Pratisha, Jagat. Just do things very simply. Otherwise, I mean, at home, just do things simply. Just realize Krishna's there. Uh, don't be too elaborate. I wouldn't take instructions from the Radha Raman temple how to do home deity worship because then the things will get too complicated. The Radha Raman temple has the highest standard of deity worship, I think, in the world, basically. Prabhupada said we can study the Radha Raman temple or the methods they utilize in the Radha Raman temple. But as far as your home worship, I would keep it really simple. If it gets too complex, then it'll become something that you're not going to be enthusiastic to do because you're going to see you have so many other duties and so much time, so little time to do everything you want to do. So I would just keep it simple. I
So
definitely
yes,
I
at
wouldn't
home
follow
I yes.
I
Sorry.
wouldn't
Hare
follow
Krishna,
the
Guru.
Radharaman temple when I'm doing my home deity worship.
Yes. I have one more question about the Gayatri mantra. Um,
Yeah.
I've just lunchtime I forget, and so
Uh-oh.
bad thoughts starts. Sorry, Gurudev. So the bad thought starts coming to mind, and then I realize what have I been doing, and then I go back and do my mantra again. So I just wanted to know like the importance. It
Sometimes
it
you
feels like
forget
it's very important.
sometimes you forget about doing the mantra or you forget while you're doing it. The mind wanders. What is the
No,
question?
no. When I'm busy, I'm working, and then I forget to do my mantra. But
Oh,
yes, but then I go back, like I remember, okay, I haven't done it. Then I do it, you know, like later, like around 2 o'clock or sometimes.
yeah, two
So
o'clock is all right.
okay,
2 o'clock
yes,
is all right,
but I
especially when
feel
when you're
yeah,
working or doing something. You got some leeway. Like 12 to 2 is usually what I tell people. Midday.
okay,
And sometimes if your mm, if your country's on daylight savings time, midday is actually 1 o'clock, not 12 o'clock, because daylight savings time you put your anyway. Or if you're living, let's say, really far north, not in Australia, of course, but if you're living in Alaska or Sweden or Norway, really far north, they may not even be in the middle of the day in the winter, and there might not even be a morning or sundown in the summer. So anyway, just got to be practical. I would say 12. If you can keep it 12 to 2, just do it within that time span. Okay.
yes, thank you. It's what is the essence of this? It feels like it's a very important thing because when I miss it, the negative thoughts starts coming to mind, and
Yes,
then
you should.
like I have
Yeah,
yeah.
don't miss it. It is very important. I mean, I'm not going to get an explanation of the Gayatri in a general class like this, but it
Okay,
is
okay,
extremely important. It connects us to the spiritual master. It connects us to Krishna's energies. Connects us directly to Radha and Krishna. Connects us to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. It's a deep meditation on Lord Chaitanya, Krishna, Krishna's most intimate pastimes, especially pastimes with the gopis and Srimati Radharani. So it's a very deep meditation, the Gayatri Mantra. So don't miss it. Please don't miss it. Prabhupada said, Prabhupada said when a devotee, I'll get you in a second, Mother Ramla. Prabhupada said, it's not like the Maha Mantra that you can make it up in the evening. have to say it at that time. It's a special mantra that's said during the sanjas. So, all right, thank you. So we have Mother Irmila with her hand up, so we have to give. She's a senior lady in the Krishna consciousness movement, so we have to give her an opportunity. What's up?
Well, I just always wondered about not offering obeisances in one hand. So if I'm holding something, I end up offering obeisances with no hands.
That's good.
Okay.
I mean, I always wondered about that too. But it's actually what I was thinking about. The principle behind that is it means that you're not taking it so seriously. You just go like that. You understand, like that. So I think it's the principle behind the injunction. Sometimes if I'm holding something for the deities in one hand, I will offer obeisances with one hand down. But I'm being respectful. But if I would just normally just put, one hand down, or like, Prabhupada talked about, what is it? He said certain type of obeisances, what, chopping obeisances or something like that, hatchet obeisances, where someone just like goes down and comes up immediately like a hatchet. Prabhupada said that's not respectful. So the whole point is to say the prayers and be respectful, and it's a detail whether you're actually on one hand. So we have to be able to separate the detail from the principle. I also thought like that too. I had the same impression. So if I couldn't have offered obeisances with two hands, if I had something in a hand, I put both my hands behind my back and do that. But sometimes as you get older, it gets a little hard to offer obeisances. Sometimes you need your hand. I don't right now, but sometimes people do need one hand to actually get themselves up again, or they need to grab onto something to get themselves up. So my understanding is it's the principle. I mean, there's other injunctions too that are like the principle that Prabhupada didn't consider so important, like wearing red garments in front of the deities. And, Prabhupada was asked about that, red or blue garments. And, generally I understood it's like completely red. The whole idea is that if you're wearing completely red, you're calling attention to yourself rather than to Krishna. So we have to understand my whole approach to these offenses and deity worship is to understand the reason behind the offenses, not just take them literally. I mean, I do take them literally, but to understand the reason behind them. I mean, you find so many injunctions that basically we do not follow so strictly, like the red garments or the blue garments in front of the deities. I mean, obviously I wouldn't wear a fur coat in front of the deities. I don't think I'd wear a fur coat anywhere. My grandfather was a furrier, and it was horrendous. I used to go into his shop, and you actually see chinchillas, and for those of you who don't know what a chinchilla is like a little animal, cute little animal, and foxes, but the what they call mink stoles or whatever, chinchilla, they always had, in many cases, had the fox head still attached to it. And the ladies would wear it and would be considered extremely fashionable, attractive, to have a little fox head hanging down in front of you. I mean, it was absolutely disgusting, and how people just didn't get it, that it was absolutely cruel. It's like that lobster thing I talked about. It's just unbelievable. People are unbelievable sometimes. Not sometimes, generally. Unbelievable. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, who else has a question in our audience?
Hare Krishna Gurudev, this is Rishikesh.
Oh, Rishikesh, Hare Krishna, it's good to hear from you.
Hare Krishna Gurudev. I just want to understand deity worship in our temple. I normally don't chant the Mula mantra. I just chant Hare Krishna mantra. Is that okay?
Yeah, I mean, we've kept things very simple. If you can chant the Mula mantra in the temple, it's all right. My personal feeling, and some people may not like this, is that everything is contained within the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That if you don't know a mantra, or you haven't practiced with that mantra, Hare Krishna Purna Shuddha Nitya Mukto Binatwam Namanamino. But not that one should be lazy and think, all I have to do is chant Hare Krishna. I don't have to learn anything else. In the deity worship I do to Radha Golokananda, basically it's anyway. I don't want to say I'm on the rug of the platform, but it's basic. It's basically I don't know what the other devotees do, but I make offerings the same way Prabhupada taught me to make offerings, which was Nama Om Vishnu Padaya, etc., Namaste, Namo Mahavadhanaya, and Namo Brahmanya Devaya. I do things pretty much the way Prabhupada taught, unless I have the deity worship minister watching me while I'm doing the puja. And that happened when we were installing the deities in Fiji, in Suva, and I was doing the first arti to Radha Galok Bihari, maybe even some devotees from Suva here. Oh, Sumukha's there. He worships the deities every day. He's driving a car. So anyway, so I was doing the first arti, and really I didn't know any of these procedures or how many circles go around, how many circles, because for me, for my little brain, I just wanted to think about Krishna and, pleasing Krishna and all that other nice stuff. And if I start to count how many circles around a big circle, I forget about Krishna. I get into my mathematical paradigm at that point. And then I do division and multiplication, and I get into quadratic equations. No, I really don't do that. But anyway, I'm just joking. So anyway, so when I was doing this arti, I frankly admitted to Nishinga Kavachi, who's our deity worship minister and my good friend too. I said, if you want me to do this arti, you have to be right at my feet, not to worship me, but right at my feet, and I'm going to ask you how I do everything. So every time I picked up an article, I said, what do I do now? He said, do this. And because he was watching, and he was right there watching me, I behaved myself and did it exactly the right way. And I was proud of myself, and he thought, he's a good guy. So in any case, the point is that at least, some of us older devotees, we have very simple ways of doing things. And I generally stick to my simple ways of doing things. There's no harm if a certain temple establishes a higher standard, then we should stick to that higher standard. Or I wouldn't even say higher standard, a different standard. Then we should stick to that standard of worship. The whole point is to make deity worship accessible to everyone who is second initiated, so that it's not something that's really you require a PhD for in order to figure out all the different mantras. So in your case, chant Hare Krishna. Chant Hare Krishna. I know some deity worship people will actually not be happy with
We just normally I do the kirtan along with anyone who's on the guest, and I do the kirtan along when I'm doing
Well,
offering.
usually, here's another thing. Usually, when I'm doing deity worship, I don't chant. I don't chant the kirtan. The reason for that is because when you chant, there's some saliva coming out. And if anybody watches when I do Guru Puja in the morning for Prabhupada, I never chant during Guru Puja. I mean, I guess the exception would be if there was no one else in the temple room and I had to lead at the same time as doing the arti. But I won't. That's how I learned, because to me, cleanliness and punctuality are the most important things in deity worship. When we first established the deities here in Nugaloka, I would actually stand there with a watch, and I would make sure that everything was to the second. And still to that, we're pretty much sticking to that standard that I established in the beginning. And cleanliness and punctuality to me are the most important things. The other things can be added later on. So one of the things, at least for myself, I don't really chant when I'm doing arti because of that. Because when you chant, then actually naturally, as you know, in the COVID times, things come out of your mouth and not just your voice. And I'm just cautious because I know when I do chant or when I'm talking even now, I'm sure if I put my hand in front of my mouth right now, that there'd be a slight dampness or wetness that my hand would have. So I do, and that's my habit. I mean, I would assume, I don't know if other people do that, but that's my habit because I just want to maintain that standard of cleanliness. Because Prabhupada did instruct us that the mouth is the dirtiest part of the body, or dirtier than another part of the body, which I cannot mention. So to me, cleanliness and punctuality stand supreme in deity worship. And mantras. Oh yeah, I'll say the mantras. I have my mantras for Giriraj that I say. I'm not saying that I only say Hare Krishna. I have mantras for Giriraj. But if I forget them, I'll just chant Hare Krishna. I have a special mantra for waking up Giriraj in the morning, and different other mantras for worshiping Giriraj. But I've accepted them because it increases my devotion for Giriraj. And then also, sometimes we may chant the different prayers to Govardhan, the Ashtakas, the 8 prayers to Govardhan. So sometimes we'll chant those. I think that my point is the first rule is to always remember Krishna, and the second rule is never forget Krishna. So if you get too entangled with complexities, I know that, at least with me, if I get too entangled with complexities, I forget why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I always want to drag my mind back to the reason for doing why I'm worshiping Krishna. Not that I'm just chanting this mantra, one mantra after the other. Why am I chanting the mantra? What is the purpose? What does it mean? Who is it addressed to? What am I asking for? I mean, all these different questions have to be thought of while I'm doing my deity worship. So anyway, I like the KISS philosophy. Keep it simple, sadhu. Keep it simple, sadhu. All right.
Thank you, Guru.
On that happy note, I have to end. So anyway, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Thank you all for coming and for your questions. See you all tomorrow night, same time, same station. Tune in.